You're in the war room with your humble co-host, Roger Stone, joined by my colleague, Rob Dew. An extraordinarily excellent report by John Bound regarding Sheila Jackson Lee. Just last week, Jackson Lee would tweet that Andrew McCabe, the deputy FBI director, who we know was involved in providing the funding for the so-called dirty dossier, the phony claim of sexual impropriety against candidate Donald Trump, allegedly in Moscow, which we have learned was a total and complete fabrication, but would later be used as a rationale for the wholesale illegal and unconstitutional surveillance of candidate Donald J. Trump, then President-elect Donald J. Trump and his campaign, and later his transition. But it was interesting that Jackson Lee defended McCabe, saying he had served his country with dignity and he was the subject of a presidential smear. In fact, Mr. McCabe has announced his intention to retire. The question one asks is, why is he being allowed to retire? Why is he not being prosecuted? Rob, if the president would follow our advice here at InfoWars, he would direct his attorney general, Jeff Sessions, to utilize his authority to appoint a special counsel in the matter of Uranium One, which would address the crimes of Mr. McCabe. And of course, because there is no special counsel law in place, that special counsel would be free to look into the dossier and its various iterations. The dossier, as we exclusively revealed here at InfoWars, was first utilized in the Republican primaries, paid for by the hedge fund manager, billionaire, and Marco Rubio supporter Paul Singer, and then, having failed to gain traction, was paid for yet again. The Fusion GPS people essentially double billing, in essence, by the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton, laundering those payments through a West Coast law firm. So,
and Roger, you made those points. So let me interject real quick. You made those points really succinctly in that C-SPAN interview that we just posted on InfoWars. Even though you did it 5 days ago, it's finally out on YouTube. And you really do lay out the case for keeping Mueller on to just kind of keep all the baby Democrats happy, appoint a special prosecutor that can look into Rosenstein, look into McCabe, look into Strzok, look into all these guys who are basically being political operatives, and really just turn the tables on this Russian collusion delusion. I thought you laid it out really well. And those interviewers were basically, it seemed like you wrote the questions, honestly, because every time they thought they were trying to get you with something, you came back right at them. And I think really just they were blown away at the arguments you were making, because you don't see those on mainstream TV. Those aren't talking points. That's something not in the playbook.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. Look, Tom Lobienko of the Associated Press and Michael Isikoff of Yahoo, formerly of Newsweek, and I believe NBC, are both very sharp reporters. I was disappointed to later see a tweet by Mr. Isikoff in which he said that Randy Credico, who had indeed served simply as a confirming source for me, confirming that, yes, Julian Assange, who he knew and who he interviewed 3 times for WBAI radio, 3 must-hear interviews, by the way, and they are archived, had given me the heads up about the contents of the emails regarding Hillary Clinton and heads up about the email of John Podesta. Neither one of those things are true. Mr. Credico, whose name I ultimately was required to give to the House Intelligence Committee, initially I was hesitant to give them Mr. Credico's name because I feared professional reprisal. And in fact, Mr. Credico, who I think is a true critic of the deep state, not a supporter of Donald Trump, a supporter of Jill Stein, not a man of the right, a man of the left, but a man of enormous integrity, someone who I've worked with closely for drug law reform and prison reform, was never privy to the content or the source of the information. He simply confirmed for me something Julian Assange had said on July 21st of last year. Ergo, he had the goods on Hillary, and he was going to publish them most likely in October. Credico confirmed that was true. Mr. Credico turned out to be accurate. The House Intelligence Committee, in an effort to conduct their witch hunt, sought to subpoena him, and he announced that he would plead the Fifth Amendment. But as far as that interview is concerned, and I think this is important, Mr. Isikoff stands corrected. I never received any information regarding the content or source, simply that Assange, who I consider to be a journalist, had the goods.
But they had already decided that Credico was your ultimate source, and they were just going to run with that narrative. And they just, I think, wanted you to admit Randy Credico's name so they could say, oh, he admitted it. He admitted it. We got him. It was just one of these, and it wasn't even a gotcha moment, but they tried to turn it into a gotcha moment.
Yeah, and look, I don't even deny that I was reluctant to turn over his name for two reasons. Right. One, I consider this a privileged conversation between journalists. I report for InfoWars. He reported for BAI. He was merely a confirming source. And secondly, I feared that progressives would have reprisals against him. Indeed, Mr. Credico was terminated at WBAI, a great tragedy because I think that his was a freewheeling and independent and most entertaining radio show. Progressive listeners in New York are the lesser for his absence, but that is the vindictiveness of the progressive left. I also am one of those who does not believe that Twitter accidentally, temporarily took down the feed of Julian Assange. Rob, can you say dry run?
Yeah, that's what happened with the president. Exactly what happened with the president. They were just seeing if they could do it, and then they come up with this cockamamie story of a contractor from a different country who did it on his way out the door just to see if it would happen, and total BS. This was something they were planning to see if they can do it, because when the purge happens, all voices of dissent will go silent, and that's when the roundups will begin.
I mean, total agreement. You'll recall in the case of the president, they took his Twitter feed down for 11 minutes, blaming some disgruntled employee who did it on his way out the door.
Right.
Nonsense. Nonsense.
Yeah, total BS. Now, Roger, I would like to get into, we got into your interview. We just had some breaking news come out. Romanian hackers took over D.C. surveillance cameras just before presidential inauguration. Federal prosecutors say. And then this from the New York Times, Trump the insurgent breaks with 70 years of American foreign policy. So this has to have the globalists shaking in their boots. I've also got CNBC director accused of spying on teen with hidden bathroom camera. And universities face the Me Too movement over sexual harassment. So the Me Too movement is now moving into other areas. And now I think some of these cases are getting a little ridiculous. This one lady that took her 10 years to talk about a professor who made comments about her weight and talking about sex. But it took her 10 years to come out with that. At some point, we have to have a timeout for some of these people and just say, really? Really? Is this what we're going to spend our time and money on? But we also spend our time and millions of dollars on the Russian collusion delusion. So I'm not surprised that we are spending our time and money talking about this. We're back in less than 4 minutes. Hold on, Roger. We're going to break. 20 seconds left. Don't forget, you can watch us on the free stream, Infowars.com/show. You're watching The War Room. I'm Rob Dew. We got Roger Stone. Stay tuned. We got a whole hour coming up.
Welcome back to The War Room with your co-hosts, Roger Stone and Rob Dew. Rob, I want to go back to one of the news items you raised today, and that regards the Romanians hacking into the system to control the security cameras during the presidential inauguration. I visited Romania, as you know, several months ago to meet with opponents of the deep state there. It's important to note that the intelligence services in Romania, which they refer to locally as the secret services, and their broad anti-corruption apparatus is largely and heavily controlled by George Soros and his allies. The United States Embassy in Bucharest is controlled by George Soros. I have seen with my own eyes that they have refused to put up the official portrait of the President of the United States in the U.S. Embassy in Bucharest. The Romanian secret services are analogous to our own deep state, and they were heavily invested in the election of Hillary Clinton. Now, here's the newsworthy part. FBI Director James Comey made several mysterious trips to Romania prior to this hacking. What those trips were about, we don't exactly know, but I am researching this aggressively for InfoWars, and we will have a special report on it shortly.
Well, that's very interesting. Right now, it lists the names of two of the people who were arrested in Romania. Mihai Izvanka and Evelyn Kismaru were arrested in Romania earlier this month, along with 3 other Romanian hackers who will face prosecution in Europe. The U.S. charges filed under a seal of December 11th were first reported by CNN. So they face up to 20 years in prison if convicted. And essentially, they took over 123 of the department's 187 outdoor surveillance cameras, leaving them unable to record for several days, which, if somebody was planning something like planning a bomb or anything like that, any type of malfeasance during the lead up to the inauguration, they would not have been able to utilize those surveillance cameras during that time period. So it'll be interesting to see who they were in contact with, if anyone, from the United States. Like you mentioned, it seems like James Comey made a trip there right before this happened. That is very interesting. Very interesting to a man who runs around quoting Bible verses on Twitter now.
I would suggest to you that the people arrested are patsies, that they are people being utilized by the secret services there, and we need to dig into what Mr. Comey was doing in Romania. I believe that he makes more than one trip during the Obama presidency, but the purposes of those trips are undisclosed. Rob, this just in from The Hill. A tweet by Hillary Clinton says that it's crazy to believe that the FBI is out to get Donald Trump. Now, this comes from a woman who writes in her book, What Happened, that Roger Stone is a bizarre character. I'm bizarre? This is a woman who mothers a daughter with Webster Hubble and claims that it's Bill's daughter. This is a woman who banishes Bill's legitimate, natural-born son, Danny Williams. This is a woman who lies repeatedly about her email. This is a woman whose crimes are exposed days before the election in a score of hundreds of thousands of emails in the possession of Huma Abedin. Who's crazy Hillary? You're crazy Hillary. And when it comes to her shrewd powers of observation, I put her up there with Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder. You would have to be an imbecile not to see the rank partisanship of the FBI, the activities of Peter Strzok, and the naked partisanship of the Get Trump squad as organized under Mr. Mueller and as conducted by Mr. Comey and Mr. McCabe.
That is exactly true. And if you look at her book, that's all she does is blame the FBI. So the FBI was totally against her, even though we have texts from Peter Strzok talking about insurance policies that they have to have in case Trump gets in. You know, like if you die before you're 40, I believe, as the text read, as he was texting his lover. So that is very, very interesting that now Hillary Clinton is back from out of the woods. I guess she's done hiking, and now she's talking. There it is. Wall Street Journal, Russian investigation was insurance policy mentioned in Strzok texts. There it is right there. You can read the whole article on Infowars.com.
and from the Wall Street Journal, not from an alt-right publication, but from a bona fide mainstream media outlet. Look, Hillary Clinton's notion that the FBI was against her is hard to square with the fact that it was Peter Strzok who changed the language in their final report regarding her illegal email server so that she could evade prosecution, changing it from to carelessness from criminal negligence, in essence. So, yes, there was an FBI bias. Hillary's right about that. That bias was for Hillary Clinton and against Donald Trump. And the overwhelming evidence demonstrates that that is the case.
Speaking of evidence, I have the lawsuit that Roy Moore filed, which it seems like the judge has thrown it out, and they are going to just anoint Doug Jones as the senator. But going through this, he definitely has a case. He's got signed affidavits in here from computer experts who looked over the anomalies. They list the anomalies. I'm going to go all over them in the next hour, where you can just see that 13,000 votes were given to Doug Jones, taken from Roy Moore, a 26,000 vote swing, which would have put Moore in the victor's chair. And I want to go to this article, Roger. This is also on the Drudge Report right now. Trump the insurgent breaks with 70 years of American foreign policy. It first starts talking about how he walked through NATO headquarters and was bitching that it was all glass and that it must have cost a fortune to build. That is basically what NATO has done. All right, NATO is this group, and that's not if you talk about the bombings that they did back in the 70s and 80s to kind of foment fake terrorism in Italy and other places. But he talks about that and how he was mad about that, and that steamed him. Also, he has broken with decades of American policy in the Middle East by recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Now, Trump tweeted out video of all the presidents in the last 25 years saying, hey, I think I'm going to make Jerusalem the capital of Israel. We're going to do that. We're going to make that change. Yet they never did it. And then Trump said it, and then he did it. And the New York Times is obviously pissed about that.
You know, it's extraordinary because it shows the difference between Donald Trump and these other career politicians. It has always been in the Republican platforms. It was pledged by Republican president after Republican president. But Donald Trump is a man who does what he says and says what he will do. He pulls no punches. This was a courageous act. And it appears that
all right, we're going to break. Roger, I'll let you finish up on the other side.
Welcome back to the War Room. I'm your host, Roger Stone, with my colleague, Rob Dew. Rob, a stunning new development. As you know, the Project for Democracy, a Barack Obama-blessed group, is suing Donald Trump and I in the federal courts in the District of Columbia in essentially what is a harassment lawsuit, an entirely bogus suit, which claims that Trump and I worked together with the Russians to hack the Democratic National Committee and deliver their email to WikiLeaks. They, of course, offer no evidence or proof whatsoever. How could they? None of this ever really happened. But now, joining as a new lead counsel in the case is a woman named Ann Hardin Tyndall. Now, Ms. Tyndall's joining the case is interesting from a number of point of view. First of all, she comes from the Consumer Finance Board headed by Richard Cordray that was created under the Dodd-Frank legislation. This is, of course, the runaway federal agency that was being used essentially to harass businesses that had no congressional or executive oversight. The president, when Mr. Cordray resigned, appointed his OMB director, the Michael Mulvaney, while those who worked at the CFPB insisted that the authority flowed not from the president to appoint a new director, but to Mr. Cordray's deputy. This is a fight we have covered here at InfoWars. But here's what's interesting about Ann Hardin Tyndall. She comes from the law firm of Wilmer Hale. Wilmer Hale is the law firm of Robert Mueller. It is Wilmer Hale who enters into an agreement with the Justice Department waiving any conflicts in the Russian collusion investigation. This is a waiver that the Justice Department refuses to make public. So to sum this up, Rob, a hit woman from Mr. Mueller's law firm has now joined the plaintiff's table in the bogus lawsuit against Roger Stone and Donald Trump. Just the motion to dismiss this bogus law firm cost me personally $150,000 in legal fees. And now, as you know, the entire top line of the Obama NSA, Mr. Clapper, Mr. Brennan, and others in the shaved head brigade have weighed in with an amicus brief reiterating their garbage about the Russians hacking the American electoral system, but once again providing no evidence or proof beyond their bogus, repetitious claim.
And no one's investigated the stinking server. I mean, can we just get an investigation of the stinking server that supposedly was hacked by the Russians? Oh, no, we can't get that. That would make sense because that would put all this to rest, and we can't have that. We have to have this thing drawn out and go after our political enemies because we really don't have a leg to stand on. That's what the Democrats are saying to themselves.
Let's go through that piece by piece if we can, Rob.
Sure.
There's a terrific new report by this researcher, Stephen McIntyre, who's been covering the DNC hack for months. And here's what we learned. In late April 2016, the DNC contracted the cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike in response to a suspected breach of their internet servers. During an on-site audit in early May of 2016, CrowdStrike suddenly discovers malware, they say, on the DNC network, and to mitigate it, they install their own flagship product called Falcon to monitor the network for malware and to prevent other hackers. In May of 2016, after Falcon has been installed on the DNC network, WikiLeaks receives mail from the DNC with dates as late as the 25th of May, detailing the alleged breach and the response from CrowdStrike. On June 12, 2016, during an interview with ITV's Peston on Sunday, Julian Assange of WikiLeaks states that WikiLeaks is in possession of the leaked emails relating to Hillary Clinton. On June 14th of 2016, less than 48 hours after Assange's announcement, the Washington Post prints an article covering a story from CrowdStrike executives Sean Henry and Dmitry Alperovich, claiming that they have worked on eliminating the last of the hackers from the DNC's network during the previous weekend. This becomes an indirect admission that their Falcon software has failed. Then on June 15th, CrowdStrike publicizes a report in which they share their evidence of the breach and the samples of the malware code they claimed that they found. It's important to note that the malware has nothing to do with email or their email servers, and to date, CrowdStrike has not demonstrated how such malware relayed, forwarded, or accessed the DNC email. The whole Russians did it narrative was started by CrowdStrike when they reported supposedly that Russian malware known as Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear were examples put forward, supposedly malware which had invaded the DNC system. Here's their big mistake as discovered by Mr. McIntyre. Their malware programs were compiled after CrowdStrike installed their software on the DNC servers. To remind you, the act of compiling a program is the process where the programming code typed in by the developers converted into an executable software package that can be run on a computer. It's a conscious act by the developer which requires precise actions to complete. By releasing samples of the viruses with the compiling dates, we can be certain that there were no malware by the Russians in the DNC network, And this, Rob, is why the Democratic National Committee would never allow the FBI to examine their servers. It is most likely that their servers were never hacked.
And people like Adam Schiff know this is the case because during your testimony, they admitted that some of these people had seen the servers. They had seen reports of them, but people like Trey Gowdy had not, and he stormed out of your testimony fuming.
Well, in fact, Mr. Comey and the Homeland Security Secretary, Jed Johnson, both sat in the exact same chair in which I sat and gave testimony and claimed that the FBI had never been allowed to examine the servers. Yet Adam Schiff and Congresswoman Jackie Speier, that rhymes with liar, claimed alternatively that that was not the case. We still don't know the truth of this, but I am one who believes with William Binney, with Ray McGovern and others, that it is likely that the DNC was never hacked at all. It is likely that the purloined material was downloaded to a zip drive or a thumb drive or some other portable device and taken out the back door, most likely, unfortunately for him, by Seth Rich. May he rest in peace.
And we had a caller yesterday who was claiming, he didn't offer any proof, but he was claiming that Seth Rich brought this information to Donna Brazile about what the DNC was doing, trying to subvert Bernie in favor of Hillary and anoint Hillary. And she may have been the one that gave him the okay to do what he did. But by doing that, she inadvertently got him killed, which is why she's running around saying, oh, he felt like he was my baby. I had to bury my baby. So there it is. Donna Brazile said she feared for her life after Seth Rich was killed. Maybe she thought they were going to come after her next. We'll be right back. Final segment with Roger Stone just around the corner. Thank you for watching us here at the War Room. I'm Rob Dew. That's Roger Stone. Infowars.com/show is the free stream to send to everybody you know.
Welcome back to the War Room. I'm your co-host, Roger Stone. Speaking of Stevie Wonder, that's the man himself. Rob, there's an extraordinary controversy going on in which Joy Villa, the singer, who made waves by appearing at the Grammys wearing a Make America Great dress, has claimed that Corey Lewandowski, who was discharged as Donald Trump's campaign manager, came up to her at a private party at the Trump Hotel in D.C. and slapped her on the rump. When she asked him to stop, he evidently, according to her, slapped her again and said, I think she said, stop that or I'll file a sexual harassment complaint, to which he responded, go ahead, I'm in the private sector, whereupon, according to Villa, he smacked her again. Now, I'm a believer in due process, and Miss Villa has said to the media that she has two witnesses and there is security camera video. Now, let me be very clear. Joy Villa is a friend of mine. She's someone I like. Some have criticized her because she supported Bernie Sanders early in the campaign, coming later to Donald Trump. Let me point out that 3 out of 10 Sanders supporters supported Donald Trump. Without them, his victory would be impossible. Now, Joe Biggs, formerly of InfoWars, also a friend of mine, comes forward to defend Lewandowski. Now, let's let the process take its course. I believe in due process. The D.C. Metropolitan Police are conducting their investigation into Miss Villa's formal complaint. A video has now surfaced on the internet of Miss Villa at a private party among conservatives where she is horsing around with a group of friends and someone smacks her on the bottom. I see a distinct difference between consensual horseplay among friends, who are, in this case, you can see in the video, goofing around, and what would be, under the laws of the District of Columbia, sexual assault from a stranger. Let's let the process take its course, but it would be my preference to see how the matter plays out before jumping to any conclusion. I myself would point out that Mr. Lewandowski was previously accused of manhandling a woman, an incident that I write in my book, The Making of the President 2016, almost derailed the Trump campaign because the presidential candidate got off of the large themes of job creation and corruption and making America great again, and had to defend the actions of Mr. Lewandowski. It is also, in all fairness, key to note that no charges were pursued in that particular matter in which Mr. Lewandowski was accused of grabbing and manhandling a woman reporter, Michelle Fields, during a scrum. So that is the latest. This is a story we will be following. A note of full disclosure, to be absolutely clear. There are media reports that I am a paid consultant or an advisor to a congressional campaign by Miss Villa. That is not the case. She is a friend. Any advice I have given her has been completely voluntary, but I have no formal or paid role in her campaign, and she is not today an announced candidate for Congress.
So, Roger, I was sent this video last night, and I could have put it out on Twitter. Personally, this is turning into a, what do we call it? Where, not conspiracy, but it's a, I'll think of the name in a second. But this is not something we usually do on InfoWars, is get into people's personal battles, although it has become a news story. But this video shows her, slapping a guy on the butt. Apparently, somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true or not, that this was the night of that party that this happened. I don't know if that's true. I didn't put it out because I don't want to get into the controversy. I don't really care. I will say this, though. I did find, I think we have a video montage of butt slapping, which I guess should be played at some point while we're talking about this. Maybe you guys can bring it up and play it. But here's a article: teen facing felony rap for butt slap. A 14-year-old boy slapped a girl's buttocks at their high school, and now he's looking at getting a crime or being charged with battery. They're not calling it a sexual crime, but they're saying it's more of a case of battery. But here's a good, here we go. We're getting some, look at that. We got the coaches slapping their players on the butts. This looks like a Dallas Cowboys tribute of butt slapping going on. So butt slapping happens all over. And I'm not saying that Lewandowski was right if he did indeed do this. I'm saying there's bigger fish to fry than butt slapping. And that's where I kind of want to leave it. But like the CNBC director spying on his teen au pair using a bathroom camera, that's what he's been accused of at this point, saying he intentionally installed a video recording device in a tissue box located in his family bathroom. That's 44-year-old Dan Switson, director of the Susie Orman Show, is being accused of doing that to record his 18-year-old live-in nanny at their residence. So
just one clarifying point. The video that you showed very briefly on your cell phone was taken in Las Vegas well over 6 weeks ago, whereas the incident at the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C. was allegedly 2 weeks ago. Again, I draw a distinction between consensual activity among friends, in essence horseplay, and something that is codified. But again, let's not rush to judgment. Let's let due process take its course and see exactly who is in the wrong here. I do think that Ms. Villa would be a strong candidate for Congress. And unlike some, the fact that she came over to Trump from Sanders does not give me pause. If nobody had come over from Sanders to Trump, pardon me, then we would not have a President Trump today. We would not have a record stock market. We would not have unemployment at historic lows, the housing boom, a conservative on the Supreme Court, and so on.
And would we have a Joy Villa butt slapping scandal that we currently have?
We probably would not. Indeed.
All right. We got about 2 minutes, 45 seconds left. It looks like the Me Too, since we're on this sexual harassment, and where I think it's starting to go a little too far. Universities face Me Too movement over sexual harassment. They talk about Celeste Kidd was a graduate student. Her supervising professor was making her life unbearable, stalking her, maybe that's pretty bad, and making demeaning comments about her weight and talking about sex. 10 years later, she's now taking legal action. Now, this is obviously isn't the case with Joy Villa. She's doing it within a couple weeks after. But here, 10 years, is there a statute of limitations on making comments about somebody's weight? I mean, where do we draw the line in this, Roger?
Yeah, no, look, I agree with you. We are reaching relatively absurd proportions.
Peak Me Too, I think is what we could call it. Peak Me Too.
Well, look, I have my best and worst dressed list coming up very shortly. And yes, I had written some things regarding the garb and overall personal presentation of Ana Navarro. And I decided to delete those because fat shaming is unacceptable on the internet these days.
We will make America great again.